welcome back, part 2. We have a star-studded lineup for you, which, John, you didn't get to meet last time. You want to introduce yourself? Or wait till you have a mouthful.
I'm John Whitmore. On the subcommittee that helps out with new faculty orientation. Sorry I wasn't able to make it the first one, but
But he made up for it. He went out to Costco yesterday and bought a brand new carrot for us.
my tenants.
Try it out. I'm not sure where our first people are, and if it's, and well, I know Ken, the head of security, is probably part of that active shooter training that's supposed to finish
Oh, I
right
think
at
we're gonna,
2:30.
Right.
active shooter situation on the campus or something.
Oh,
Oh, no,
Training.
Training
Court.
for preparation, yeah. So, yeah, I would certainly advise you to get to those. I think they also have a video PowerPoint training, which I know all of you and us have to go through periodically, through all these trainings online through HR. Anybody
Except
done
they
those yet?
told us that the first year you have to go to the face to face.
Oh, really?
For certain kinds of trainings. To get credit
That's
for it.
changed, which is better. Well, it takes more time, so, but you actually get more out of it. Sitting there at your desk, it's too easy to grade papers while that thing is doing its thing. Although I did learn the one time if you wait too long to hit the button when the PowerPoint finishes, it starts all over again.
Oh.
So, don't let that one catch you. But yeah, once Ken or Bev get here, we'll go, hey,
Shazam.
Hey,
how's that?
one training to the other, sorry.
We figured that out.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, how you doing?
Good.
Would you,
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready, it's just me,
I want to
it's
breathe
just,
for a minute.
it's just me.
I said, you wanna get a drink or a snack or something
No,
first?
I'm good. So, I'm ready to roll, you ready?
Sure, let's go ahead.
Alright, thanks Ken. So, I'm Ken DeMello, I'm the Director of Campus Safety here for the west side of Spokane, CCS. The reason I say it that way is that, we're a district, and my partner is Charlie Holland, who is based out of SCC, and we split our responsibilities up and down division. We're based out of, for me, I'm based out of SFCC, he's based out of SCC, but because we have a campus in Colvin, for example, he'll cover that. I cover the campus down in, cover the campus that's down in Pullman, that's down the WSU campus, that's my responsibility. We have the adult education center that's on Monroe, that's my responsibility. And so he's on the other side, so we kind of split our roles here. But we are generally here, so from 6 in the morning till 6 in the afternoon, we have full-time staff that are actually CCS employees that work here. You typically can identify those by black shirts, and that's what we refer to them as black shirts. We have student work studies, they do most of our parking enforcement for us right now, and then we also have student security officers who wear beige shirts. So, and they will do all the functions necessary for us to relieve us. One of the things that, some of the things they do for us is, they'll jumpstart your car. We can have the ability to unlock your car if you lock your keys out. If you need, we'll walk you to and from your class or the bus stop, depending on what it is, so offer those services. One of the things from the campus safety perspective I like to talk about is we are a microcosm of Spokane. And what that means is that anything that goes on in the Spokane area is most likely going on our campuses. So, unfortunately, we do have theft on our campuses, and most of that is crimes of opportunity. And that's simply as, which we had happen, somebody puts their brand new Apple computer down, they turn around and literally did this, turn around, and it was gone. And it's just somebody walking by and kept walking. So, with that. The other thing that happens is sometimes we're our own worst enemy. I actually took a picture of somebody's purse that was on the front seat of the car that was open, and they actually had their wallet open. So inside the wallet, you can see all their credit cards. So we take a picture, for record keeping purposes, then actually call the person and say, hey, oh, is that where my purse is? Yeah, sit on the front seat of your car, can you come and get it? So the problem with it is we have people that will actually break into cars to try to get that crimes of opportunity. For you all, as faculty here, is what we tell folks when we contact them. We end up contacting about 70 people a year, roughly, numbers-wise. And when we talk to these people for whatever it is, disruptive behavior, could be whatever, we explain to them that basically the faculty are the kings and queens of their castles. And what that means is that inside your classroom, what you say goes. There's a way for them to appeal that down the road, but they have to comply with what you say. It's called failure to comply if they don't, right? They can disagree with you, that's okay, but they still have to comply. And then they can go to like the dean, Bonnie, if they need to address that. But initially, they have to comply with what you say. And that's what our expectation is. With that, with disruptive behavior, we would ask that you all manage your classrooms to your expectations. We all have different thresholds of things that we can handle or we can address on our own that we feel comfortable with. If you don't feel comfortable, you can use the resources you have around you, Judy and Ken as an example, to use them as mentors or coaches to help you. If you feel like you need to involve us, give us a call, and then we'll come and take care of it. That happens quite often a year. We will, typically we do have a limited police commission, but we try not to use that. And what I mean is we go out of our way not to actually enforce the law. We would rather have people go through our code of conduct process, and that's all about corrective action. Trying to get them to behave the way that we expect them to. They're not in high school anymore, sometimes they want to bring that mentality here, but we consider them to be adults, regardless of how old they are. Running start students, their expectations are to comply with our code of conduct, so we do that. Call us as a resource, and we're here to help you. We will provide the resources to you to make your classroom be successful. That's what we try to do. The other thing that I want to talk about is our mantra here: see something, say something. And what I mean by that for you all is if you see something that's unusual, say something. If you see something that's out of the ordinary, say something. Just let us know and come and we'll come and address that. And the examples that I use are these two. You probably, if you're just at my training over here, you heard these already, so sorry. But we had a report of an unusual person sitting in a car. And so they called us, we go out there, or actually I go out there and talk to the person. And it literally, the quick scenario, literally turned out to be a dad reading a book in his car waiting for his daughter to get out of class. No big deal. The second example that I've used is we get the same very similar car, somebody taking pictures of our early learning center, which is happened to be over here at the time. Right now, it's actually over here, but over there it was at a time. Somebody sitting in their car taking pictures of our kids out on the playground. We have, right out here, is our photography building. We have a photography program here. So that by itself is not unusual. But when we went and contacted that person, in this case again, me, we'll contact her and say, hey, what are you doing? It's a non-student taking pictures of her 2 or 3 years old with a telephoto lens, no criminal history, and a non-student. Wouldn't that seem unusual? Yes. No record, and I will tell you that typically a registered sex offender, the first time they get caught, is not the first time they committed the crime. So in this case, there's no record, no indication of this person whatsoever. We do what's called a suspicious activity report. We give that to the police, and now that person is on the police radar. Again, 2 examples of our community getting involved with that behavior. Dr. Chrissy Davis-Jones is our interim vice president of student services, and so she would normally come and talk to you about this, but she asked me to. We do have registered sex offenders on our campus. We are what's called open enrollment. And so I will tell you that they are the most controlled people that are on our campus. For every registered sex offender we have, they meet with me and the vice president, and we basically interview them. And we decide at that point whether they're available, whether they are going to be a benefit to come to our college or not, and make the determination. Typically, for example, somebody that just got out of prison, that literally gets out of prison and comes to our campus, we're probably not gonna let them in right off the bat. The reason for that, depending on how long they are in prison, that's a controlled environment. And for those of you that have kids like mine, you go down to like the WSU, my son did, and they get exposed and they have to wash their lawn, they have to do their laundry, they have to figure out what they're gonna eat. They have all these different things that they have to do that becomes an adjustment for kids in college, right? Well, likewise for prisoners, they get told when to go to bed, when to wake up, when to eat, when to sit, when they can play, when they can do everything. It is a very, very controlled environment. And then they come out and they have freedom again. And some folks frankly can't handle that. And the way they handle that is frankly commit other crimes. And so what we like to do is see them out and about for a while to make sure they're gonna be successful in their community before we allow them on the campus. And that will typically be the way that works. But again, level 1, 2, and 3s. Level 3s are the most likely to reoffend. Level 2s are the second most likely to reoffend. And the level 1s are the least likely to reoffend. We have all 3 of those on our campuses right now. We typically, level 2s and 3s, they have to sign in with us. When they come to campus, they have to say, I'm here. And then when they leave campus, they have to say, I'm gone. Right? If you have a level 2 or 3 in your class, you're gonna get notified of that. That you have a registered sex offender in your class, you'll get notified that through the vice president's office. Level 1s, you may not, that's not public information, you won't get to know that. The reason you have these in your campus, you have a right to know, you should know that information. But I would suggest to you this, is don't make assumptions, and I'll give you an example. We had a level 2 sex offender go into a classroom that had a series of Running Start students, from the high schools in the class. And we actually do try to make sure that there's no Running Start students in the class compared to the registered sex offender criminal history that come up. So it created an uproar of this event because he was a level 2 registered sex offender. It was a little bit taxing to try to explain to the faculty member, I appreciate that you have a bunch of 16, 17-year-old girls in your class, but his target is 5 and 6-year-old little boys. And that's the reality of it. That's the reality of a registered sex offender. Sometimes it may not be what you think. It may not always, we've had female registered sex offenders on our campus. So it may not always be what you think. You get to know that. We make it they can choose to disclose that information if they're not. For level 2s and 3s, if you were to search somebody's name, it would pop up because it's an open database, right? That information is out there. But we do try to make sure that it's up to them on the level 1s whether they choose to disclose or not. We encourage that they not because there's a lot of negative connotations with that. For example, somebody can be a level 1 sex offender that's a senior in high school that has sex with a freshman, right? They could become a registered sex offender for that. Still a little bit odd, but that's how they could become a level 1 sex offender. And that still happens. Just know that they are the most controlled people on our campus, so the only ones that I get to meet all of them with that. There are other folks on our campus that haven't been in prison as well. We don't know who they are because we're open enrollment. So please remember that. The other thing I'd like to talk about here real quickly is Title IX. Title IX, if I'm a sports person, if you remember Title IX in the early 70s, basically it was a law that was passed, and when it was passed, people took it to mean it had to have equity in boys and girls sports, right? That for every amount of dollar you spent on male sports, you had to spend on female sports. Here's the crazy thing, when you read the law, it says nothing about sports. It says 0. What it says is you have to be free of discrimination based on your gender, sexual orientation, whatever, right? For college, you can't be, your gender or whatever cannot be the sole purpose of you being discriminated or affect your ability to get educated in a nutshell. So we have to investigate those. Title IX, so if you have sexual harassment, sexual assault, those kind of things, we have to investigate that. If it's based on somebody's gender or orientation, we are obligated to investigate that to make sure, provide them the resources or a remedy to make sure they're in class. We have those happen throughout the year, from an actual sexual assault to a simple harassment case. We have both of those going on actually right now. A simple harassment case that somebody has targeted somebody based on their gender and won't leave them alone, right? That's harassment based on a gender. It is affecting this person's ability to come to school and do something crazy like simply get educated, right? So we investigate that. I will tell you what will typically happen right away, there'll be a no contact order issued by the vice president. What that means is that they can't talk to each other. And how that may affect you in the classroom is, you may assign somebody to be in a group project, and you have somebody come and say, sorry, I can't be in there, I can't have any contact with that person. So for us, understand that a no contact order is not like it is with the police, where it's a true no contact order. They can walk by each other in the hall, they just can't say hi. They can actually go to the cafe. One can be at one table, one can be at the other, sit there and have lunch and no contact with each other, and that's okay. They can be in the same class and not talk to each other, and that's okay. Now, the opposite of that is you go into Cinexo, I go into Cinexo, which is our cafe. You take this class, I take this class. Then you begin to target, that would be a violation of a no contact order. So that'll happen right away. We investigate that, myself and Officer Dunbar, Barbara Williamson, and Amy McCoy, or not Amy McCoy, Amy Potts, thank you, are the Title IX investigators on this campus. Most of us have been to some sort of school to investigate that, so we will investigate that and we turn it over to the Title IX coordinator, who ultimately gives it to the board, and the board makes the decision on the ramifications for those behaviors. And that's what it is in a nutshell. So you may experience that. But we ask of you, if somebody reports that, tell us. Tell somebody, let us know, and so we can make that determination on how we're going to proceed. Sometime we do what's called a preliminary. That's actually going on right now. We're doing a preliminary investigation just to try to determine if the facts will actually equate to a Title IX, a full-blown Title IX investigation. Sometimes it doesn't rise to that. Sometimes it's Cynthia Vigil, who's in the back here, will say, you two don't talk to each other anymore. She's our code of conduct person right now. So, and it may be simple as that. But for your role is to make sure that we get notified of that. And the easiest way is to let us know, let somebody know, because you will never get, for lack of a better word, disciplined for telling something, but you may get to meet the dean because you didn't report something. So we'd rather know than not know. Goes back to that, see something, say something. So we're here as a resource for you, whatever we can do to make your jobs easier, that's frankly what we wanna be. We wanna make you guys get our folks educated and have a good time doing it. So, and not have to put up with a bunch of kid BS. So,
Did you tell everybody where you're located?
oh, thank you, Judy. Judy, if you don't know.
He's my neighbor, that's why.
She's my neighbor, she's a junior security person. Yeah, we're trying to make stickers, we can't get anybody to make them. Anyways, we're in building 16, room 145, and the office number is 533-3333, and that number will generally be answered 24/7. So, that's all I have.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Does the bullying, stalking sort of behavior count online as well?
Absolutely.
So if, sometimes I had a situation in another institution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody was, literally stalking another person on Facebook.
We are, believe it or not, the cultures, kind of the right word, the cultures on each campus are unique in of themselves. We have a lot more stalking and harassment events on SFCC campus than they do at SCC, and I don't know why that is. But don't drive a Honda on the SCC campus, because it'll get stolen.
Or Subaru.
Or Subaru, yeah, because it'll get, so it's different that way, so we do deal with a lot of that.
Okay.
I don't know why that is, but absolutely, we would rather, again, we want that person to have the experience to do something crazy, like simply come here, go to class and get educated, and not have to deal with that other BS.
Right.
So we'd rather know about that than not, because there are specific things, especially now with social media, there are specific things, and I'm not a social media person, but there are specific things that people can do that can rise the level, and so now we have what's called cyber stalking as a crime and actually a violation of our code of conduct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
Before he runs off, I'm gonna ask
Yeah.
clarify.
Yes.
I'll introduce myself in a minute.
Yeah.
A couple of things that I just want to
You
review,
can introduce yourself.
just introduce, besides the fact that I volunteered to be a parking
She
attendant.
did volunteer to be a parking, that's my favorite subject, by the way.
Just for clarity for faculty on the issues that you've brought up. The first one is if you have a sex offender in your classroom, just to clarify, faculty will not be held responsibility for the behavior of level sex offenders. In other words, it is not your job as a faculty member to make sure that that person behaves himself, and you will not be held responsible for that.
I sort of.
Well, that's important to clarify for them, they need to know where their responsibility
The reason I
is.
say that, the fact by themselves that they're a registered sex offender, that you can report any violations associated with that. But their behavior in the classroom is yours to manage, classroom management, right? We talked about that, how you feel, what you feel the appropriate level of interaction is with that particular person. If you don't feel comfortable, again, this goes back to you all having the atmosphere to be able to instruct your students and train them, is to call us for those student conduct violations that we will investigate. There's a sex offender over here, but just because they're a sex offender, they still have to comply with our code of conduct over here. So if you have a student here that's drinking and drunk in your class, that's not a sex offender, and you have a student that's drunk in your class and is a sex offender, that's being a sex offender may or may not play into how the referral goes to the code of conduct meeting. So.
Well, their issue is usually if you've assigned group work or
Yes.
they're supposed to meet outside of class. It's not like if something were to happen and that student does something that now all of a sudden they're gonna come back and sue you because you didn't intervene or you didn't do something along those lines. You are being asked, however, and you will have identified for you students who might be running start students or gateway students who are under the age of 18 with this person so that you can be responsible and manage and say, well, I'm not gonna put those two people in the same group. But mostly faculty are worried about, I've got the sex offender in my class and what if he does something wrong and are they gonna sue me because I didn't do something?
We have the same expectations of a sex offender, and they'll tell you, they're actually required, depending on their restrictions, because some of these folks come in with restrictions on them already. And they will tell you those, and if they violate those, they're not violating the rules of the college, which they actually are, but they're also violating the rules of conditions of release as well, which will actually get them put back in prison. So for the group classes, if somebody's a level 2 or 3, I would suggest that they not go in a private home to do something like that. Those, again, level 2s and 3s, you're gonna get notified of that. So make sure that they do it in a public setting, they go to those group things, and that's what I would suggest you in
And
a
can you
public setting.
disclose that to the other students in their group?
Absolutely, that level 2 or 3, that's public record. They could search that name online, and level 2s and 3s would show where they live and what their history was on the sheriff's office, depending on what county that they were convicted, and if they're here registered, so.
Second one.
Yes.
If you have any safety or security issues in your classroom, what should a faculty member do in addition to possibly calling security in order to help handle the situation? But in terms of student conduct and things like that, is doing a BIT form or a student incident form, or what would be that?
So behavior intervention team, right, is a process that we have, and those are for, when we talk about the behavior intervention team, those are things that we call concerning behaviors, behaviors that they may rise to the level of code of conduct, but there's some underlying tone. And then, for example, we just had a situation where somebody was disruptive in a class. They were frankly a jerk in the classroom, which is a violation of code of conduct. It's disruptive. But when I saw the report, what I became concerned of was, why was this person, what triggered this person to be this way? So part of that process, the BIT process, is to recommend they go meet with one of our counselors that can help address that underlying thing. That's the BIT process. If there is a safety concern at all where you feel safe, give us a call. We'll come and take care of it for you. One of the things that you have at your disposal, I'm not sure if you guys have talked about this, Ken, but you have the ability to suspend somebody from 3 days out of your classroom. At this, it's kind of, and Cynthia could probably talk about this better than I can, but kind of at the drop of the hat, when somebody's being disruptive to your classroom, that kind of thing, which actually should have happened in the situation I described, is that don't come back for 3 days. Go see Cynthia Vigil, our code of conduct dean, and you go talk, until you talk to that person, don't come back. And if they say, I'm not leaving, fine, don't leave, you call us, and then they'll leave. So that's just kind of how it works with that. And that's the anchor or the weight that you have behind you. It's just, I won't say that it's arbitrary, but you have the ability to suspend for 3 days. We have that same ability in a sense, that we can suspend some, if we ask for a suspension, it's gonna be from all campus for that. So, but just one of the things that you have to remember, it's a suspension from your classroom, because these aren't crimes that we're suspending people from. Even for us, if we ask for somebody to be suspended for 3 days and they come back on campus, that's not a crime. It's just another violation of our code of conduct, which could potentially work its way into a crime where they get kicked out of school, and now they're non-students and they get trespassed. So, yeah, so kind of remember that at your disposal. I will tell you that, I'm assuming that she'll speak to this, but if you suspend somebody for 3 days out of your classroom, up to 3 days, you need to make sure that the code of conduct dean knows that. And the easiest way to do that is that student conduct incident report, or I'm sure she'll address this, but maybe speaking for her a little bit, send her an email so she knows right away that that's happened. The BIT referral is any concerning behavior, anything at all. And we've had BIT referrals from students that are homeless, that are not being successful in class because they're homeless. The being homeless by itself is a concern, but when you attribute that to the other things that they're going through, BIT folks may want to know that, because we have access with the group that we have to maybe provide that person some different resources depending on where they're coming from and the reasons they're homeless and so on, those kind of things. So again, you will never, nobody will ever tell you, say, gosh, shoot, I wish you wouldn't have submitted that BIT referral, that was terrible, what were you thinking? We would rather you submit that and then circle back with you, and that's generally what happens. We try to circle back with every single BIT referral and say, hey, this is what's going on. So.
And the last one was about timeline.
I don't know, we talked about that.
Yeah, we did talk about it, but I just want to say that as faculty, if anything is disclosed to you, you have the responsibility to make sure that you tell someone about it. What that means to you as faculty is, if you have students journaling in your classroom, or if you have those kinds of scenarios for students where they may in fact disclose something, you want to make sure that you have told your students, by the way, if you disclose something to me, I have an obligation to disclose that. So please keep that in mind when you're writing information down, because as all of you will, if you haven't already, go through your Title IX training that you'll have to do, but I just want to disclose to faculty that remember, I don't care whether they want you to or not want you to. If you hear about domestic violence, if you hear about student on student harassment or issues off campus, if you, any of those things, you have a responsibility to, you don't have a responsibility to investigate, in fact, you aren't supposed to, but you do have a responsibility to make sure that you report it to the appropriate people. The appropriate people might go to your dean and say, gosh, I heard this information. But it's also for students to understand that if they tell you something, you now have an obligation to tell somebody, so they can't just tell you about it and say, oh no, I don't want you to tell anybody, too bad.
And Bev reminded me, so Title IX applies off campus too. So if you have a student in your classroom which we've actually had, that's a victim of domestic violence, we have an obligation to provide them resources on campus, even though the suspect is somebody that's not associated with the campus. Once we find out about that, we have an obligation to provide them resources. And that's typically just, we won't necessarily investigate that event, but we will document the resources that we provided for that person. So, if you have any parking questions, those kind of things, tickets, call Beverly, she'd be more than happy to help.
No, that one I'll bother. But anyway, thank you, Ken, I just wanted to clarify those things, cause.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken, we appreciate it, and certainly we could have a whole session just with Ken with some of your trainings coming up, it'll be pretty material, but we are actually now on our fourth speaker behind, so.
I'm gonna hurry, I won't be long, I just wanted to clarify those things for you, because those are sometimes questions that get overlooked that faculty often have, and I'm usually the one that has to deal with it. So, just real quickly, I just wanna throw my name out there, I'm Beverly Vredevelt. I have some pocket calendars, from WEA, I believe most of you signed up for it at the new faculty orientation, so we're all good there. But if you would like one of these, they don't come in the mail with the rest of your stuff, so I'm gonna just throw them up there, but I just wanted to say hi and make sure that Ken clarified some of that information. You now have a face. Search me on Outlook under VR and you'll find me. I'm your union rep on campus, so thank you.
Which department are you in?
I'm in the math department,
Okay.
but if you just do a name search under VR, I just am like the only one that pops up,
Okay.
so I'm really easy to go. So I just wanted to clarify it.
All right, well, moving right along. I wanna say counseling, but now you're not counseling.
I'm an interim dean, that's why I say. So I'm Cynthia Vigil, and welcome, Christina. Some of you have been here this last year, some of you are brand new. But just a couple of things. I'm representing Chrissy Davis Jones, and she is a vice president of student services. So a couple of quick things about structure. So the counseling department is the only faculty group that's on the student services side of the house. And I always say that because we think of just instructors as part of the union, as part of faculty. Counselors are there as well. So I just want to remind you that if issues come up in your classroom, I'll tell you one thing, students are really good, just like your kids, about saying, so-and-so said this, so-and-so. And they do the same thing to counselors. They're like, so-and-so said this, so-and-so did that. So we take a hearsay, you listen. But I always encourage you, call the counselor, pick up the phone and call the counselor. So if you hear a comment, I'll give you an example. So there was it was a professor that was Chinese, okay? He was a Chinese professor, taught sociology. She's here, Ping Ping. And so it's a situation where the student said, well, I'm not doing well in your class because your accent, and the counselor said not to take your class. That's not true, absolutely not true, but that's how the student conveyed it. So Ping Ping called and said, hey, what's this about? And I said, who knows, but somebody might have said, she has Chinese background, you're gonna connect or whatever, but they will always turn things around. So I encourage you to pick up the phone if you have an issue with the counselor. That's number one. I represent Chrissy's side of it. She's the Title IX coordinator. So you keep hearing this whole sexual harassment thing. It's a big, big deal. If we find out that there's a Title IX, a sexual harassment, that gets reported to the police department before we found out, that's like a big no-no. And it's happened. It already happened this year. So the minute there's no gray area, well, there is no gray area. If you suspect any kind of sexual harassment of any kind, pick up the phone. You can let Chrissy know. I tell people, email her. It's your responsibility to reach out. Don't wait for her to show up. If she's in Texas or wherever, you still have to reach out. You have campus safety, so you have two places. And you don't have to worry about investigating. You just have to report it. But in some cases, some staff are thinking that, I'm not sure about this, and maybe they're gonna report it, it's your job to report. You just have to leave the information, okay? And it does happen. We're a very young campus here. So that's campus safety. I'm the student conduct officer. Believe it or not, there's already like 4 cases open, and I've closed 2 cases of student conduct. The school just started. So what are these about? I asked Ken back there, I said, so hey, do they know what the students' rights and responsibilities are? He said, no, I've got too much to cover. But the homework is, if you Google on our internet page, student conduct, it's in the iCatalog and it's buried. And it tells you what students are responsible for as far as their behavior. So if the student calls you an effing bitch, if they call you an effing teacher, if you hear about it, that's student conduct. It's not allowed. And so what I'll do is I'll reach out to the student immediately. I will acknowledge that you did a student conduct incident report. I will meet with the student and there will be some kind of sanctions. And sometimes it will be a verbal warning if the student's shaking in their boots and they're just like, oh my gosh, okay. But some of them are very righteous. They were like, I have the right, she was this, she was that. Well, they need intervention, right? So I want to encourage you, get familiar with the student code of conduct. Get familiar with that, what you can expect and not expect. And I know for new student orientation, we're gonna try to do a better job saying, hey, you know, maybe you can go off at City Hall, maybe you can go off on the phone about your credit card. That same behavior wouldn't be tolerated here. And they need to know that from the get-go. You have to be really strict about that and let them know that, because I'm telling you, it'll come up. So hopefully you all have mentors, but my office, I'm building 30 on the 2nd floor, and it's the same place where the counselor's offices are. And some of the issues that came up in the past, that if you have a situation where a student needs an intervention, and there have been situations where a student was cutting on themselves, a student was crying, a student was kicked out, those are all reasons to walk the student to the counseling department. Okay, we cover generally from 8 to 3, we're here. So you can walk a student over there, and they will do the intervention. And we also have wellness coaches. We have mental health intern students that will intervene with the student. So you can always do that. We have, we're over there, we see teachers come in with their students right off the bat. Some of them will reach out by phone, and if nobody's answering, just walk the student over to Gateway. You get to know that building well. We're just right down from administration. We're in the hallway, come by and say hello to us. But we'll work with that student. So that's just like an intervention. But what he was talking about with BIT, behavior intervention, is somebody's doing something that, maybe it's a yelling or aggressive behavior, but it's not student conduct. That's a BIT, it's behavior intervention team. And those people will respond to a student. Might be a student who's just angry, who hasn't broken any rules, but you can see some kind of behavior. And we'll see this, we'll see a student, popping off in financial aid, then a student popping off here. Well, that's a pattern of behavior, and that lets that team know they've got to do some kind of intervention. The student conduct is different. They broke the code of conduct by doing something, by cheating, by, there's a whole list of things. But threatening behavior, intimidating, bullying behavior, all of that goes under that verbal abuse, so get familiar with that. And of course, holler if you get any questions, okay?
I'm confused about something.
Sure.
So when you're talking about counselors, you're really talking about behavioral, mental health sorts of issues. You're not talking about academic
Both.
advising. Both. That's I can't quite figure out what.
So if
the
you came
deal
from a
is.
university, the model at a university is psychological counseling.
Yeah,
And at a community college, many times we refer out. And a lot of our folks actually have counselors out in the community. This is not their first stop. So our counselors they're gonna be doing academic counseling.
okay, so it's the same, whether a student needs help registering for classes or a student is depressed and needs to talk to someone, it's the
Correct.
same office.
And Loren, he's gonna talk to you about that, because
Okay.
students have advisors, they could be counselors, they could be faculty advisors. Counselors don't see all students, so he'll talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
But just know that that's the place where you go for those kinds of
Okay, I
things.
wouldn't have been really confused with
And they do both.
I
So
did,
we have-
I went over to the office, so I know.
Right, so we have a mental health counselor, Shauna Shelton, and she's on Title IX, she's on BIT, she supervises the mental health interns, so that's her role there. But all counselors have to respond. If there's a suicide on campus, and Loren can tell you he's been a responder and he doesn't have a mental health background, we're all responders when it comes to that kind of thing. Okay,
Thank you.
any questions? Is anybody overwhelmed yet? Packed day. So just reach out to your mentors as the questions come up, and honestly, they'll help you out.
So I think I missed the name. Is there a certified counselor on campus that can send students to speak confidentially if they're afraid of Title IX? If they don't have to give details?
Yes, that's
Who is
Shauna
that?
Shelton.
That's Shauna Shelton.
Yeah, she is we have two, but we have her as the pointed person. So what she's talking about is that in a Title IX situation, if you find out first, you have to report it. But if it's a situation where the student talks to the mental health counselor first, then that person can, the HIPAA can do some different things and can go a different route on doing it. So that's what she's talking about. But if you hear about it first, you have to report. You can't refer off to a counselor at that point. If they may be involved, but you gotta report. Anything else? Okay, so welcome. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah has to leave real quick, so we're gonna give her a few minutes right now, and then we'll take a quick break so you can refill your cups and clean up some of this stuff, so we don't have to eat it all after.
Yeah, so Ken gave me a 3 to 3:15 timeframe, so we're gonna make it in there for about 2 more minutes, so I can run off to a doctor's appointment. I'm Sarah Martin, I teach anthropology here at the Falls, but I'm also the chair of the ITALIC committee, which is the Institutional Teaching and Learning Improvement Committee. I always forget the word improvement because I actually hate it. The concept of constantly continuous improvement would have been a lot better than improvement by itself. But anyway, we focus, as opposed to faculty development, although we work very closely with some of the same goals, we focus a lot more on assessment, both general education assessment, so there's big institutional general education that we have, critical thinking, communication, diverse perspectives, that kind of idea, as well as helping you do teaching and learning research in your classroom. So if you're interested in assessment, not directly in terms of how you're assessing your students, but the change within your own assessment. So teaching and learning projects, research, that kind of deal. We have a grant for that, and we also have a lot of resources to kind of walk you through how to do that. We also do a lot of professional development courses, so course design. We also help you develop course learning outcomes for your courses, and then help you get them through curriculum committee as well. So pretty much anything you can think of that relates to anything to do with assessment, both in terms of reflection on yourself and your own teaching practices, or stuff within your classroom in terms of improving your assessments in your classroom, we're there. We also work with e-learning, who you will hear from in a little bit, helping them or co-facilitating some things with them and working with them, if not upfront, definitely behind the scenes on a lot of the stuff that you're gonna start seeing come out. We also oversee the W, which is an initiative on campus. So if you've taken a look at the AA degree, you'll notice there's a D and a W that students need. The W is something that we oversee because individual faculty members have to apply to teach Ws. So we oversee that, and I feel like that's about enough that I really need to be doing. So
What does a W stand for?
writing intensive, so anything besides English 101 or English 102. So a lot of, let's see, for English, intro to fiction, a lot of them are W's, that kind of idea. So,
Thank you.
unlike the D that goes with the course that you may teach, the W goes with you and your class. So that's why you have to get approved and you're assessed on a different level. So the curriculum committee handles all the Ds because they're approved at a course level, while ITALICS handles the Ws because they're approved individually. So we also have an open campus meeting tomorrow at 11:30 to 12:30, which is your open hour, quote unquote, for some of us, that we're gonna spend a lot more time kind of going through what exactly is the W, how does it work, how do you apply for it, that kind of idea, and a few other things about our professional development courses that will come up. So if you have the time tomorrow, it's in this building in room 110. So to give you an idea of what's coming up and what's active during that time. Any other questions? Awesome, I'm going to my doctor's appointment. I feel like I really wanna go to the dentist, but it's not necessary. You don't want to.
All right. All the way from our counseling department, we have Loren here.
Well, Cynthia probably pretty much covered a lot of stuff that I was gonna cover, but just to let you know, I'm Loren Pemberton, I am one of the counselors here. And because of the transition that has taken place under the student services side of the house, you know, we are a bit short and in limbo right now, so we still don't, we haven't been officially set up as a chair. But just to tell you again, a little bit about what we do there, we're primarily academic support for the students. That's what, if there's issues that come up, that's what we're there for. If you see them in the classroom that they are not performing as well they should be, you can send them over, then we can talk with them and seeing about what direction we can go. If there's just, tutoring needs that need to be met there, we can assist with that. If there are things outside the classroom that's affecting their performance in the classroom, we can talk about that and see where we go from there. Okay, so that's what we're there for. As soon as they get one quarter down with less than a 2.0 GPA, we encourage them to come in and see us and to identify those issues that might be coming up. If they do 2 quarters in a row that they don't earn a 2.0, then they have to come in and see us, and then we want to talk about getting them back on track and getting them the direction they need to go. Okay, so we want them in that track, being successful. We do offer some of the student success workshops every Wednesday over there in Building 30. Again, we put that, Jordan puts that out every Wednesday, so you know what's available to them. Anywhere from study skills, dealing with their math anxiety, all kinds of stuff like that. So if you run across any of those students like that, refer them to that Wednesday student success workshops over in Building 17. We're primarily interested in their academic and career success. So if they're floundering on the career direction, what they're going to major in, anything like that, that's what we're there for. We do teach career planning, a couple of sections of career planning every quarter. We're trying to transition to that. I think Cynthia mentioned a little bit about partnering up with the STEM program this quarter. We're doing that and getting that career direction right in the classroom along with the science faculty to help them out and making sure they're heading in the right direction. So they get that degree planned out. Transcript evaluation is a big thing for us. Students coming in and wanting to know how soon to complete their degree. So we are, all the students are required until they have 30 credits on their transcript to meet with a counselor or an academic faculty member that has gone through the faculty training before they can register. They put blocks on them and do that. Speaking of that, I might as well go right into that. If any of you are interested in academic faculty training, we are holding this advisor training on October 24th from 1 to 3 p.m. We only have 9 seats left for it, so if any of you are interested in that, I'll get you this flyer and contact Chris Stolte, and she's going to be running that faculty training so that it can help you if you want to help students get lined up for their degree planning and advising them for the direction they're going. So let me know if any of you want that and think about that for a minute. What's that?
The date?
October 24th,
Thank you.
which is 3 weeks from today.
I'd like.
You like one right now, okay. I only have 8 left.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm automatically the academic advisor to the students with the HDD program. Is that something that I need to attend?
I would say you should.
Okay. Be really helpful.
Okay.
I would really like to attend because I'm also in the same boat. I have class till 3:30.
Okay, we can talk, because obviously I'm connected with your department, and so we'll get you set up with that. And you're kind of in a little different boat there with that, and actually you are too. So, but we'll be touching base with that. Okay, where was I at here? Degree mapping. We were really trying to get students on track with, and I'm sure you've all heard about our Pathways programs. We're starting Pathways, all the new students coming in this fall, getting them into a pathway and getting them tracked into their major. And so we want to set them up with that and with the university that they're transferring to. We do have a transfer center set up, if you're familiar with, over in Building 17, where many of the regional university admissions reps come in that can talk to students about their programs, their majors, and transferring out there. Obviously, we're very connected with Eastern, and Eastern comes every Wednesday, and now they are bringing departments out each of those Wednesdays along with the admissions reps. So we're making some big strides there, not only just giving them overview information about the university, but actually bringing program people out so they can get definitive information from those programs. So we're helping them out there, over in the transfer center and the sub. Financial aid degree plans. If you're not aware, students have to be coded into a program here if they're receiving financial aid, and they have to be taking all of their courses that are working toward the completion of that program. Financial aid is a whole very sticky bailiwick for students, and they have to be on track. And so if the students have been here over their time limit, so to speak, or credit limit, they have to come in and see us and making sure that they are taking the exact classes they need to complete their program. And that's why the program they have to be coded into properly, taking the right classes. And we have to sign off on that. So if any of your students, you hear anything in the classroom that they're not getting their financial aid, or if they're having trouble with financial aid, sometimes they get this letter from financial aid and they get very intimidated by it. Just send them over. It's just something it's federal regulations that we have to abide by, but it's just paperwork that we do have to process. But we do want to keep them on track. They do have to come and see us for that. Change of major, again, is a kind of a new policy that the college took over, and we have a form now that they have to fill out to change their major. And again, it's very much tied to financial aid. And so we have to go over and sign off on that. So again, if you hear students in the classroom talking about that, they have to make sure to come over and make sure that we get that set up for them. Transfer planning, again, that's a big thing for our campus here, and getting them set up to heading in the right program, the right prerequisites for their major. The AA degree covers general eds, but it doesn't get them into their major. And so we want to make sure that they're taking those courses within their major, within the degree, that will get them there most efficiently. That's what we're working on. Crisis intervention, again, Cynthia pretty much covered that basis for you, but if there is incidents in your classroom that you need something, you just give us a call. We drop everything and get over there right away. Our facility here that we're set up for is very short term. We do mostly referrals off campus, but we'll get them in, take care of the situation immediately if something happens. Questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. You'll find yourself sending the students to financial aid office often, as also you'll be sending them over to counseling often. So never think that you can't send them over there. And if, in case of counseling situations, like Cynthia said, get up and walk them over, and then for sure they got there.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then you don't have any worries about that.
If you can do that, that's a great way to do it, because a lot of times I'll get a call that, I'm sending somebody over there, we never see them. And it's sometimes, if you can just walk them over, that's the best thing to do. And if they have the questions, just send them over. We try not to give them a run around. I just had a student this afternoon that had already been given run around to 3 different offices. And, so we want to try to eliminate that if we can. So I try to take them over, and then if an issue comes up, I will usually walk them all also over either to financial aid or admissions.
Where's financial aid located?
They are in building 17 upstairs. Yeah, that was the biggest thing when we got moved over to the new building. That was the thing that kind of crushed my heart, because all the issues that we have is usually with admissions and financial aid, and we were just down the hall or upstairs from them, and we could just do that. Now we gotta walk them across the way, but we get them there.
Is building 17 a student?
That's the student union building, mostly one floor, but the I don't know, what do we call it? The northeast end of the building or whatever it is, does have two layers. Downstairs is admissions, registration, cashier,
Right, okay.
running start. Upstairs is financial aid and disability support services. There. Okay? Great. Anybody else? Advisor training? Next year, okay. We'll get you going.
Thanks,
Thank you.
I guess it'd be northeast according to the fancy little map that we put in the back of your faculty handbook, and also some other things that Skylar just pointed out. Well, did you tell him it was in there? All those threat alerts that Ken was talking about before is all color coded right there. So you can go through what's the threat alert and what should you do about it. The bit, all the bit stuff is there. So it's all right in the very back 2 pages of your handbook. So I would say this is probably one of the most useful documents you'll have here at the Falls, just because all your quick hit, who do you call, what's their office, who's the boss of this person, and whatever, it's all there. Now, you probably have already met them or at least seen their emails, but somebody you'll probably be in contact with here is Tim and Ben. You can tell them apart because Tim's the good-looking one. No, I meant, no. You'd swear they're kind of like 2 peas in a pod. But how many people made it to that e-learning conference the day prior to ours, actually the 2 days prior to our new faculty? Didn't know if, I mean, hopefully y'all got an invite, the ones that we had email addresses for. But they had a really good e-learning conference before the school year starts each year, so maybe next year you'll make it to that. But all of you, all teachers have Canvas shells for all your classes, so hopefully you'll be using them. I'm getting much better.
That's right. So Ben and I are the instructional designers. We work with the e-learning department. So we are here to help you with any applications of technology in a teaching way. So anything that you're using technology to help facilitate your classes, to help teach, to help develop instructional materials, that's where our expertise comes in. We both have teaching backgrounds. We've been on faculties before, and now we're here as a support role for you. So we're not quite IT. We don't help you with the passwords and set up your printers. But when you're trying to develop a rubric or develop a lesson or want to know how to do a lecture capture or some of those instructional side of things, that's the things that you'll call us. Ben just handed out a card to everyone there. This is probably the most important thing we have to offer you right now. On one side, it's got all the contact information for everyone in the e-learning department and kind of with a 1-sentence description of what that person can do for you.
So we have someone dedicated to just Canvas issues. That's Mark Linnell, contact him. And we have an electronic media specialist, that's Rick, on that list. And he's got a full production studio for any of your video or media needs. He can also come to you, come to your class. Any weird idea you've got, he's ready to take it on as far as film goes. Not any other weird ideas, but as far as media for your classroom.
And then on the back of that same card is a kind of a menu of the different offerings and services that Ben and I have to offer for faculty. So take that with you, hang it up on your poster board. When you have a question, you'll know who to call and how to get to us. We also offer a couple different faculty development training opportunities. One of them is what Ken was mentioning, that we have the
Foundations of
Canvas course. So if you want to start learning how to use your online classroom more efficiently, we have a standalone course that's built just for that. You can start it at any time and start working your way through it at your own pace.
We have one in here right now, Mark.
Yep.
He's already gotten through the first couple of modules of that, so nice job, Mark.
And then we also have a faculty development course in which we offer a different topic of training each month. And this month our topic of training is faculty presence, and that's something you'll be hearing about more in the next couple months anyway around campus. So we encourage you to get in there and join in that. Well, with that course, for every month's training that you complete, you're eligible for a $25 stipend. You know, it's not huge, but it's a little bit, so it helps.
And so Canvas is pretty unique. It's pretty adaptive and it changes pretty constantly. So one other thing that I do is I send out every 3 weeks a newsletter. It can get spammy. I try to keep it to just the basics. But I'm gonna send out one tomorrow and it's gonna have some of the bigger changes that came over the summer. So in case you weren't here, in case you didn't read any of those emails, there were some changes over the summer. And so that newsletter that comes out about every 3 weeks will have the latest and greatest changes with Canvas. And then any other things that e-learning is doing as far as professional development opportunities. We have a training on October 18th for the Faculty Development Day. And then we kind of do some around, you know, like a Friday afternoon if a lot of faculty have asked us to put together something on this, you know, writing rubrics. We'll put something together and then we'll let you know that way. So that's a good way of staying in touch with what's going on with e-learning.
Thank you.
I have a quick comment. I think it was the last newsletter that you sent out regarding Canvas, it was a ways down there, and it was about, you could click on this link and then you could add a little quiz that would help the students start up with Canvas. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
See?
Yeah, and so we use it, and we didn't have to do it ourselves, which is even better.
Yeah.
So you do have to read all the way through their emails, so maybe in the beginning you could give me bulleted points so that
We're working on that right now.
A table of
Okay.
contents, yeah.
Yes.
What time is the October 18th training?
There'll be one at 9:30 and then one at 11:30.
Was that on Andrew's?
Probably.
Possibly.
Okay, I didn't think I saw it on there.
I didn't get
What's
his
it
email.
called? The e-learning training? I don't think it was actually posted on that email I just read.
And I think more details will come out in the next couple of days.
Okay, is there a building for that?
I think it's gonna be in building 30.
30
Yeah.
at 30?
I saw it this morning in an
That's all
email.
this and that,
Oh, you
right?
did see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you guys install Camtasia or something on our office computers to record lectures with one of those board thingies that you can?
Yeah, reach out to us and we can kind of walk you through some of that stuff. We don't use Camtasia, we don't support that license, but we do have Panopto, which is pretty similar.
Okay, and then what about that website that faculty can dump all their course documents on, that's not Canvas, like the Easy Web or
I don't know anything about that.
intranet? Not intranet, it's under the faculty and staff where we can have like our own website that's Easy Web.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe, so it's
It is.
Yeah, I've never even heard of
There's
that.
content in there.
it still works though.
Cool.
It works, but I can't get it to work.
Yeah.
Asa and I kind of.
So my recommendation would just be to use Canvas, that's where your students are expecting things to be.
Yeah.
And you already have shells for all of your active courses anyway.
As far as backups, we can talk to you about solutions for that too.
Yeah, cause a lot of times like Canvas won't work, or I had like 3 students this quarter who were registered and on my roster, but they just, for whatever reason, my class would not show up for them.
Mark, call him, he's the wizard. He
70,
can definitely
10.
help you with that. Yeah.
She's
She's got it memorized.
We use him so often, I have to call from an undisclosed number sometimes.
But those boards and cause I need to record some lectures for this.
Yeah, we'd love to help you get quick started with that.
Perfect,
Yeah,
thank you.
let us know. Alright, well, thank you for your time, I know it's really valuable. Good luck this quarter. I know we're 2 weeks in, so some of you, if it's your first quarter, you're just keeping your head above water, so keep swimming.
You're
Let us know if
all
you
at
need help.
the district office?
No, we have offices at both
Oh,
schools.
okay.
Yep, and so our office at Spokane Falls is in the basement of the library. So if you're going into the library, instead of going up to where the books are, you go down and we're the first door on the
Do you have
left.
a window at least?
A little bit.
A window to a hallway,
Yeah.
it's in
Ben's
the
office is,
basement, yeah.
Ben's office is one more floor down than that, so
Oh,
he doesn't
no.
get it, but.
They're trying to perpetuate the series.
Thank you for your time.
That's right.
Thanks, fellas. All right, next we have our president here to visit with you for a minute and answer some questions. And what could I say about him that won't adversely affect my employment?
Everything's already been done.
The best and worst, he's from Montana, which obviously has sound character, quick wit, and a wonderful demeanor. But then also He's a Montana State alum.
Oh, no.
And what's that tell you about his SATs?
No.
We got drool on them, but.
Can't wait for the football
All right,
game.
there goes the employment.
So good afternoon, everybody. Some of you I've got the opportunity to meet so far and spend some time with, and others I haven't, so I'm looking forward to that. Your time is coming, so be patient. I didn't really have much to divulge or share with you, but I would like to know if you have any questions or anything like that. You've survived 10 days now. You can be a lot rougher on students tomorrow because our official enrollment count is today, so it doesn't matter what happens the rest of the quarter, so, well, it does. But really, if there's any questions or anything I can answer, I'm always interested in how I can support you in the classroom. And I know I've heard really good things from you as far as the support you're getting from other faculty and within your divisions. That makes me really, really happy because that's not always been the case. It's kind of, there you go, survive, and it's a much different environment, so I'm thankful for that. But any questions at all? We have to blow 8 minutes, so somebody step up. You're gonna have to start singing, Ken.
Clear the place quickly. Let me check the hall for DSS is next appropriately.
Yeah.
I have a question. Can you talk a little bit about pathways? I keep hearing about it and it sounds fantastic, but I feel like I'm coming in the middle of the conversation, so I know this is a new initiative and
It's a new
why
initiative
was it
that,
created and et cetera, and where's it going?
so we have a habit here at the Falls of kind of latching on to everything that comes down the river. Every best practice, every initiative, we usually gravitate towards. And this one has been a little bit different in that it really just kind of struck a chord with people, and we looked at our graduation rate, which is not great, and said we have to do something different. Students are getting lost between the time they start and the time they end. And I think for some students, they don't even know that there is an end. They're coming here because their parents said you got to go to college. So Pathways was a way to structure our curriculum or our programs in a way that kind of funnels them into, I don't know what I want to do, to maybe I want to do this, to I want to be an engineer or whatever. And so I might draw my interpretation of Pathways for you, just to give you an idea.
You could dance it.
Yeah,
There's an interpretive dance dissertation website, by the way. They have a board, it's called Dance Your Dissertation. It's great.
So this is crude at best, but so think of each layer. This is a birthday cake with candles, by the way. So think of each layer as a quarter, and when you get to the candles, they're split into 3. But so when a student comes in on that first quarter, they can take really whatever they want. There isn't much harm that's going to be done because all these classes down here are going to be part of the 45. They're going to transfer you don't really have to decide what you're doing that first quarter. And as you move up into the third quarter, you have to begin having those conversations. You have to decide. In fact, we have an exploratory pathway, but you have to pick a major or a program after the second quarter. So then when you get to the third, you probably are pretty locked in on what you're doing. You're starting to take classes specifically for that program. And then of course, you're really specialized the second you're taking your 200 level classes. Changing your mind here is no big deal because you can slide over and go. Changing your mind up here requires probably to go back all the way. And so we want to get as much intervention done at the beginning, some career counseling, which we really haven't had. We had asked these 17, 18-year-old kids to make a life decision without any guidance, what careers there are, what careers relate to the programs we offer. They may be here because their friends are here, so it has nothing to do with what programs they can get. So the pathways, we don't have graphic yet. We're working on that. We have 6 of them, 7 if you count a Pullman pathway. So because we can't offer everything that we can offer in the catalog at Pullman, we have a special transfer type of pathway that we're developing. We have been working on it for 2 years. We have not been a funded pathways school, which means we did not get the AACT national grant. We didn't get a Washington Spark grant. Although they have offered another one, which we are gonna compete for. We have to submit something by October 31st, so hopefully that's our ticket to the finish line. There's a lot of confusion and a lot of people are exposed to pathways at various levels. Some people think, or have heard we're doing it. Some people have been at the table for 2 years and kind of know where we're at, but we're fairly scattered. The previous president had some pretty hard deadlines that, okay, we're gonna have all of our typical student schedules made for every program, we're gonna implement it this year. So during NSOs this summer, we had some of those conversations with students, but we really don't have the infrastructure around them to support that. We don't have the number of advisors we need. We don't have the technology piece to track whether a student gets off course of the pathway that they're on. So all those things we're gonna be working on to develop this year. And it may take longer than this year. I've kind of removed the deadlines. So we'll just slow down, do it right, see where we're at and progress that way. So it is not necessarily an initiative, it's just kind of it's a sea change. It's a completely different way of looking at how you do business. And my goal is to hand a student a sheet that has all 6 quarters on it, the classes in the order they need to take them in, addressing prerequisites and all that stuff, and just say, here, this is what you should take. And I know Christine will say they walk out of my office and they change their stuff, but at least you've had that conversation with them. So that's kind of what Pathways is all about.
Faculty Development Day.
Okay.
Okay, my question is between the HR trainings and then the new list of trainings that day, are those interchangeable? Are there gonna be any of those HR trainings available? Cause I know the safety training and those types of things, I guess I'm very fuzzy as to this new.
Yeah, the new day is a little gray because we didn't have a whole lot of time to plan. So the calendar committee came up with those days, which is a great idea, and all of us have, well, one of us administrators has an idea of what we could do on that day, but it's going to be faculty run and faculty driven. So what you'll see is different departments having developed certain things for the department, which you're allowed to take advantage of, or and then I've asked the Vice President of Learning to also create some others in collaboration with faculty as kind of a menu. So if your department doesn't come up with anything, you have an option of taking some of those as well, just to get your day well rounded out. As far as HR stuff, I don't know if they are planning to do anything that day. I haven't seen anything.
Okay.
So I think it's just campus specific program or department, I should say. I know starting to see a couple things from different departments. They've got pretty robust stuff. Some even have agendas and stuff built already. But just an opportunity to take a break from teaching and immerse yourself into learning something new. And you really, I don't think are restricted unless.
So you can take the ones that the campus are offering?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
I'm just-
absolutely.
Now, what if our departments are putting together quite a bit of stuff for the day?
Then I
Then
think
are
you're
you-
kind of,
You can do either?
yeah, well,
Okay.
I think it's up to your supervisor. I mean, I
Okay.
think if a department wants to do something and they've got the day planned, then
Okay.
I'd be part of that team. But if they're not, know that you have other options in the afternoon, so. Okay. Ellen?
This is probably not a question for you, but I just on the concept of faculty training. When there's a faculty workday on the calendar, do we just assume we're gonna be given meeting makers and there's things we have to do that day? I'm just not quite sure what I mean, I know they're scheduled all throughout the year, but I'm not quite sure what happens even on a faculty workday. Are there just
I think-
campus-wide meetings and seminars and things that all faculty go to on those days normally? I'm not.
Are you talking about the ones at the end of the quarter?
Yeah, that are like before Thanksgiving or.
Those as far as I know, aren't necessarily structured days. Those are for you to finish up the work of the quarter. So grading and anything that you need to wrap up, it's just time to do all that.
So technically, if one maybe needed to travel, you could also travel and take your work with you type of thing, like,
Yep, up to your dean, yeah.
okay, but you don't have to like be here on campus to attend something, or are there gonna be mandatory meetings?
There's not anything usually those days. I think by that time, we're all fairly just,
So I guess because we had two
end,
faculty
so-
work days before
Yeah.
school started on the Wednesday, and those seem to have been jam-packed, the Monday and the Tuesday before classes started on Wednesday.
Yeah, they're a little bit
So-
more structured.
So the
at the
other
beginning.
ones, like, okay, so it depends on the department maybe? If they're doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Department will likely have meetings that day the
They will.
requirement class. Well, each
Okay.
department's different, and I've served on a couple tenure track committees, and we've always set those committee meetings, those final meetings of each quarter during those days, because it's so hard to schedule around everybody's class schedule, so there's a lot of different uses, yeah, it's different by department.
And then the HR, some of you were at our HR orientation, there's certain kinds of trainings we have to do, but those are not scheduled by HR, they're scheduled on campus, and certain things that are offered on campus meet the needs of the HR requirements. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. And we have to attend them face to face,
Those are the step increase ones and stuff
online.
like that they need.
And you can attend at either campus too.
Oh.
I mean, they're equal, just the times are different. So I've had to go to SCC for classes before, because I needed that training this year, like a FERPA training. And I'd already missed the one that was here, or I had a class during the time that was on our campus, so.
I'm still confused about what counts and what doesn't, but I can talk with you afterwards. Maybe you can see.
For the exempt and I don't wanna say even classified, they get in and see what training that you've done and where you're deficient, and it has it categorized. I don't know if that's the same for faculty or not. It is.
Yeah.
So others will show you that link of where that's at. Do that, so.
And it's a 2-year period. So you're entering 2017-18 and then 18-19, and those trainings need to be done in that period of time. There will be some in your first year that you have to get done this year, and then after that.
I need to make a list so I can
Yeah.
keep track.
And then after 2 years, then you'll reset and you
Yeah.
start again with those trainings over again.
Yeah, that part I got, it's just what needs to be done and which time frame. It's a little confusing.
Some of us who've been here a long time still have to go, what?
Yeah.
Every time, what? When? It's not unusual.
I guess I was a little tied to my question too, because I was hoping those might overlap a little in the
so you could
future,
do that,
like just, cause it's a
Use
two
that day.
opportunities, that sometimes it's hard to fit them in.
I can get that
I don't
feedback to HR.
4 trainings a year is a lot. Well, I guess it's 4 trainings in 2 years.
Are they all in person or are they some on?
Just in the first year you have to be, and then after that you can do them online.
Okay.
Yeah, but you tend to get more out of them if you go in person than always online.
Yeah, there's a tendency to get to do other things because the PowerPoint's running. So, what else, everybody?
You can use weekly emails that you send out, I think they're weekly.
Yep,
The last couple of weeks, the opening part, it talks about student count. And then it also segments out the student counts by different categories. Do you talk about those? Do you know those off the top of your head? Cause I'm not sure what they mean and what the significance is. There's like state or something.
Yep, state support is usually the big number, and that's kind of the one that we track by default. When we talk about enrollment goals, we're always talking about state support, and that's just your regular credit student, usually from the United States that is signed up for classes. They can be full-time or part-time, but they are degree-seeking students. And probably 80% of them are on financial aid in some way or another.
They don't have to be on financial.
They don't have to be, no.
To be counted in that.
Right, yeah, financial aid doesn't have anything to do with that, it just happens to be that that's most of who they are. The self-support are usually international students in the learning program or the language program. It's a very small amount. And then the contract are running start students. So they count in the way that we get funding for them, but we don't get state support as far as through our allocation that way. So running starts are cash cow kind of thing. The way it breaks down for budget for you is, I don't know if I know the exact numbers off the top of my head. But say for instance, we get $18 million from the state to run this institution. $18 million isn't enough to run how we currently are set up. And so we have to add what we call local funds or operating support to that we get that money from the revenue that we get through Running Start. So this year we added $4 million from Running Start revenue to that budget to come up with 22, and that's the budget that we go with. We have a record number of international students here. They are all cash paying. There's no financial aid there. We can claim up to 3% of their FTE, but after that, it's just excess money. There's no FTE benefit to that at all. So we are just barely tapping that ceiling this year for the first time ever. So you would think 22 million is a fair amount, but we had to cut 400,000 out of the budget to be able to balance. We will have savings. We usually end up the year with anywhere from 500 to 700,000 of savings, but at the beginning of the year, they need to see a balanced budget, and so we get creative there. So, and unfortunately, by the time I get the budget, I can't do anything with personnel due to union contracts and things like that. And so the people that take the hit are adjunct. They're my spigot. I can turn them on or I can turn them off. And unfortunately, that's where it is. So my goal is to get into some planning modes and talk about what budget is next year right now, because in January, we'll have to have the conversation for renewing contracts and get an idea how big this institution is going to be. Enrollment is, I think we've hit bottom, so now we're kind of flat. We're almost identical within 5 FTE where we were last fall at this time, which is good considering the economy in Spokane. I think the economy is fairly robust, or it's getting there, and usually when that happens, we don't have any students, so we're able to maintain our enrollment fairly well. It would be nice if Spokane's economy tanked and enrollment went back up. We'll work with this for a little while. We have a pretty good influx. People from the west side are moving here, companies are moving here, so there's a lot of activity. So I don't expect a lot of enrollment peaks. I think we'll have nice, slow, steady growth is what I'd like to see. So, all right. My second act isn't here, but
I have one more question for you. This Friday, you've sent us an email about our 50th
celebration.
party.
Yeah.
The party, that's the shindig that's happening. And so do you want to give another blurb about that?
Sure.
And we're all encouraged to come and wear something special, blue and yellow maybe?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
So we are celebrating our 50th anniversary. Don't do the math because I think we're actually in our 51st year, but we're gonna have a little to do every month in celebration. It'll be different, but this one's our main kickoff, and so we're gonna have just a lot of events. If you come early, you can do the soccer games. The girls play at 2 and the boys play at 4. And then at 4:30, I believe we're gonna start the games. Then we have a lot of lawn stuff. You might have saw a little bit of it today, the gerbil balls and all that stuff that the kids have out there. The art center or the art gallery will be open. Planetarium will be doing shows. Lots of programs. We'll be kind of giving demonstrations. In fact, some of you might be involved in that in your specific buildings. We'll have 3 food trucks here. We're getting a proclamation read by the mayor's staff, kind of denouncing it, SFCC Day thing. Choir will be singing, jazz band will be playing. Just kind of a neat little evening, couple hours is all, and just kind of kick it off. So it should be fun. We have a very vibrant committee that's putting this stuff together. That's excited about this kind of stuff. So that's the result of it. So. And then if you want to stay, Wonder Woman is at the drive-in theater, which students have a huge inflatable screen that they blow up in the parking lot. And, a couple hundred people show up for that. So the candy is like it is in the regular theater, but like a quarter of the price. So you get really cheap candy there. So.
And it's the current Wonder Woman movie.
It is the current one. Yes, you may have already seen it. I was drug along and I saw it. It's a good movie actually. So. My girls approved. So with that, I'll leave you, and I don't know where the other two are. I think I'm being followed by DSS and Andrew maybe.
Hey, Ken is actually on the phone trying to get people over here a little earlier than they had been scheduled, so thank you. And we'll I was actually gonna talk for a bit about mentoring. Again, my name is John Whitmer, if I haven't met you already. And Judy and I are kind of the liaisons for the mentoring program. Many of you already have mentors, you may not know it yet. If you are unaware of who your mentor is, I'd be happy to let you know, just see me afterwards. And some of you are still unpaired, but right now we're talking to all the department chairs and making sure that they try to pair you up with the mentor. And I have some guidelines. This is not a strict and hard fast rules, but here's some general guidelines that we expect of the mentors. And I like to give these out to the mentees, you, because you kind of know what to expect from your mentor. When I was here, starting 20 years ago, I had a mentor and I never knew who it was, so it wasn't very helpful. So once you know who your mentor is, feel free to talk to them about anything. Their purpose is to help you get a transition into SFCC culture, make it a smooth, fun transition. Help you out with absolutely anything you need help with. So I'll be sending out these guidelines to your mentors as well. And again, if you have any questions about what the mentor is, see me after the meeting, I'll try to read my notes. Thanks.
And I will send you all out a list of the speakers who are here today, so if there's any questions you want to ask, we can shoot an email.
Very helpful, thank you.
Angela Merritt is from our disability support. She wanted to share a few things. You've probably already gotten emails at the beginning of the quarter for students that had VSS. Insurance you would be aware of.
Okay, so some of you I already know, and you probably have already dealt with me. So it's gonna be some review, but I will be quick. I will keep it under 10 minutes. So disability support services, every college has one, maybe called something different, disability access resources, something like that. But basically all of us are there to ensure that we're abiding by federal and state laws that say that we cannot discriminate against students with disabilities and that we need to ensure equal access to our programs and facilities and all of that. And we actually have, federal laws that we're following, Section 504 of the Rehab Act, the ADA, and then we have state laws as well. So we actually have a core services bill, and then we have, I think that's an RCW. And then we also have policies within the institution, if you look in our board manual. So really, our job as an office is to work with students mainly. We also can work with the public as well if they're coming to an event or something like that to make sure they have access. But our job is to provide reasonable accommodations, auxiliary aids and services for students to ensure equal access. So we're here anytime you have a question or want to consult about something. Our job is to make sure that we're providing equal access. So it's not just necessarily when a student comes to ask for an accommodation. So if you have something that you're like, I don't think this is accessible, we'd be happy to work with you on that. So I just want to give you a little overview of what we do with students, because some people think like, well, how do students even get accommodations, or do they just show up and ask you and give it to them? So we're required to have an interactive process, which means we interact with a student. We can't just have them like submit something online and then just say, well, here you go, here's what you get. We have to interact with the student, we have to interact with you. We can't just sort of make proclamations. So our job is to meet with a student, collect documentation that shows that they have a disability, and a disability is some kind of medical or other diagnosis or impairment that rises to the level of disability. So it has to actually impact their life. So if I have allergies, but I can take an allergy medicine to mitigate those, or vision problem, but I can use glasses to mitigate that, that's not a disability. So it has to be impacting a major life function, which in our case is often things like test taking, reading, writing, hearing, seeing, mobility, things like that. So we collect documentation, we meet with the student, have that interactive process with them, ask them what their functional limitations are, where are they having problems, and then we assign accommodations based on that. Now, if you get a letter and there's an accommodation on there and you're like, that doesn't make sense for my classroom, that's okay. It may be I sent a test taking accommodation letter to bowling, and there are no tests in bowling or orchestra or whatever. But if it's something where you feel like that accommodation would fundamentally alter your course, so that's another thing is accommodations are not, we don't want them to fundamentally alter the nature of your course, so to take away something that you are requiring from a course, if that is a fundamental part of your course. So let's say, well, like a person just contacted us on the listserv that we have statewide, and she's like, we have a student in massage program who has PTSD, and part of the requirements in that massage class or program are that you give massages and you get massages from other students. And the student with PTSD did not feel comfortable being in that vulnerable position, having other students give them massages, and was not going to be able to complete the program. So she worked out with an interactive process with the faculty, and they made some accommodations and adjustments so that student could do something different. Since really the fundamental part is giving massages, or maybe you could get a massage from a person you feel comfortable with, like a licensed massage therapist and not another student that you don't really know. So those are kinds of things that are where that interactive process comes in with faculty and students. So common accommodations are things like test taking, so extended time for tests, distraction reduced environment possibly, and that could cover a lot of impairments. So somebody who has difficulty with concentration because they have ADHD or PTSD or autism, or they might have a learning disability that makes it slower for them to read or to write. What we don't want to do is measure the disability. So we don't want to say, well, if you can't get this done in 50 minutes, even though your reading rate, you may comprehend reading, but it takes you twice as long as the average student. We don't want to be measuring reading rate, we want to be measuring what they know. So that's what we're trying to mitigate that. Assistive technology, so you'll see things where we're sending out things saying, this student's using a digital recorder or a LiveScript smart pen or FM system or has an interpreter in the classroom. Those are all things to help the student access the environment. Note taking, I try not to say that very often because we have a volunteer system. So either the student has to find somebody or the teacher has to assist them in finding somebody. And I just don't feel like that's the best, most independent way for the student to function. So if we can, we try to find other alternatives. Now, if the student is deaf, recording's not gonna work, right? So they might need a peer note taker. But if they have a learning disability, it takes them longer to write, or they have difficulty dividing their attention amongst listening and writing at the same time, we might assign a digital recorder or some other device so that they can be more independent and take their own notes. E-text is one we do a lot that you guys probably don't even notice because we don't put it on the letters because we don't want to freak you out. But a lot of students with learning disabilities, especially reading disorders, may have better auditory input than visual input. So we will give them their books in an electronic format as long as they have rented or bought the text. We have agreements with publishers and we'll provide that in an electronic format so the computer can read it to them. Sometimes we even scan their tests in and have the computer read those to them. But we try to do that in-house and not worry you too much, but we may ask you, and we may let you know that they're going to be doing their tests in audio because most likely they'll need to do it with us because it's kind of complicated. Or they might need handouts in advance so that they can take them home and have their computer read them to them prior to class. So, if you guys have any questions or concerns right now that I can answer quickly.
So if we need to set up a time for a student to come take a test with you guys, how far in advance do we need to do that?
So it's the student's responsibility to set it up. So, and they're supposed to come in 4 days at least in advance. This week they've not been doing that. So I just keep reminding them to do so because we need to email you, get the test from you, administer it to the student, and return it to you. So I want to email you about 3 days prior if possible. You may get ones at the last minute because students came in at the last minute. And there have been a few times where I just sent the student back and said, you didn't do your part. So you need to take the test in the classroom with everybody else, or we'll do the best we can to get it for them. One of the things I didn't mention is students are not required to come to our office, not required to use their accommodations. You may see students who you're like, they really need to go to DSS, or that student really seems like they have a X, Y, or Z. I would just caution you to not diagnose students yourself or be like, I think you have autism. I really think you should come to DSS, which has happened. I would just focus on the behavior and say, you know, I noticed that you're getting behind in class or you're having difficulty writing or whatever it might be. And say, you know, have you thought about counseling and peer tutoring and DSS? Those are all resources that might be able to help you, and I'd be happy to help hook you up with those. That way you're not being like, you have to go to DSS, because it's our job to provide access if the student pursues it, but they have every right to succeed or fail like everybody else. So they may choose never to come in, and that's their choice, which is kind of hard sometimes. Another quick one I want to mention is service animals. Students with service animals are not required to come to DSS. A service animal is considered a piece of equipment just like a wheelchair or a walker or a cane or a prosthetic leg. So they're not required to come register with us. You will see letters that talk about service animals because the student has chosen to come to DSS and disclose that. If an animal is in your class and you're pretty sure it's not a service animal because it is not well trained, it is disruptive, it's not potty trained, snarling at people, whatever. If it's doing any of those really disruptive things, you can ask the person to take it away for that day. But the person can come back without their animal. If you're really sure it's not a service animal and you're like, somebody needs to check into this because this is really disruptive, feel free to contact me. I've called students to say, hey, your dog was lunging at people in the gym and, blah, whatever. Also, if it bites somebody or menaces somebody, feel free, and I was hoping Ken was here, to call security and just say, this needs to stop, and they will go and confront the student. They're very professional about that. But if it's just like, you're like, I don't think that's a service animal, feel free to staff it with me and we can talk about, okay, maybe I'll talk to the student. But I mean, you'll see, there's one lady with a dog that's like this big. It's the biggest dog I've ever seen on campus, and it is a service animal. So some people think, oh, if it's huge, I need to tell somebody because that seems weird. Or if it's really tiny, sometimes it's hard to decipher if it's really a service animal. But we can ask, there are 2 questions we can ask, and I feel comfortable asking those students and talking to them about that, so feel free to contact me. So DSS, we're open every day 8 to 4. I'll leave a couple business cards, or actually you're gonna provide our contact information to everybody, right? Okay, and anytime you have a question about an accommodation, or you're like, what does this mean, or why is this, I don't know if this is appropriate in my class, please feel free to consult. We have to have a deliberative and interactive process about that kind of stuff. So we're here for you. Thank you guys. Thank you.
I have one other thing to add, and this was just, I don't know why I never thought about it earlier. I received an accommodation form from the DSS office, and I'm looking through it. As I look through it every time, okay. The X marks, all right, fine, I can do all of that. And then for some reason I clicked on something that was X'd, and voila, a whole bunch of more information showed up that I hadn't had before. And why didn't I do that before? I don't know. So make sure you click on the X's and there's more instruction.
And we have a little button, it'll be like,
Very
more info,
nice.
and it pops up like, what is, some of the most difficult ones are things like flexible attendance, which is kind of a can of worms. But for people who have chronic illnesses and things like that, asking for, if you say 3 days and you're out, maybe we need to look at flexing that a bit if we can in your class. Those ones can get tricky, so there is more information if you click on more info that really specifies, because it is a little tricky. And like I said, we are here to staff at any time. I went over 10 minutes, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Amber, appreciate it. And I made a mistake on the scheduling, my bad. I told you 4, actually I realized now looking back at the notes. So if you have to see somewhere, Kevin, otherwise, our Vice President of Learning, Dr. Andrew Feldman, is here, our cleanup getter, and that will wrap it up. And I will stay as late as anybody wants to answer any questions.
Just use a baseball metaphor, I'll stay.
All right. Especially since
Hi, gang. How's it going so far?
Good.
I saw Ken earlier this afternoon. I said, is there something in particular you wanted us to talk about? Then I got to thinking about it. So you guys are all new, but you're not necessarily all new to teaching. So I thought about, let's see, we've got a little thing going on. You saw perhaps the email that went out with the announcement about Faculty Development Day on October 18th. There was a list of various workshops that are can be put on by your colleagues. So you don't have to attend those, but they're there in case you want to. And if there's department meetings going on or not meetings, but work stuff going on, do that. But we tried to schedule those morning or afternoon, sometimes both, so to accommodate folks who are doing department stuff at one time and then can maybe go to one of these workshops at another. So one of those workshops was about assessment of student learning outcomes. And so when I say assessment, you say,
Student learning outcomes.
no. Good, I didn't see anybody do the assessment eye roll, right? How many of you have know what I'm talking about? Okay, so what do we use assessment of student learning outcomes for?
We should teaching as effective.
Okay,
Student success.
yeah, both. All right, so we always want to improve what we do as teachers, hence to help our students be more successful. All right, do we do that in a silo, in a vacuum?
Yes.
Yes, we do, and that's the problem. That's the problem, is so on that day, that workshop, we're gonna talk about how to write meaningful and measurable learning outcomes, but we'll also be continuing that discussion throughout the year, and this is something we have to do for accreditation. Every course needs to have meaningful and measurable student learning outcomes, and we need to report on those, but we also, the purpose is what do we do with it? And how do we improve our teaching and thus our students' learning? So when I first got into assessment, the vocabulary was all over the place, and that's why the eye roll came around, was because people really didn't have a good sense of what does this mean? How do we do it? What's the usefulness of this? And so I think one of the first things we do is define what that vocabulary is all about. I mean, we expect that with our students when we're teaching, especially things like, math or languages or whatever. There's terminology that we expect students to use, and same thing with outcomes assessment. So what's the difference between objectives and outcomes?
Objectives are what you want to do and outcomes are what you did. But then what happened with the
Close. So think of teacher-centered versus student-centered. Objectives are teacher-centered. They're when I teach geology, what I'm gonna do to my students. It's not quite right, but. But I have a list of things, my outline of what I want to cover, what I want to expose them to. And the learning outcomes are what they should be able to do after they've completed the course with a C or better. Okay, do they have to meet all those outcomes? Not necessarily. They could squeak by, maybe not get one out of, there were say 5 or 6 for a class. If they missed one, they could theoretically still pass the class. Are outcomes related to their grades? Yeah, roughly. So not exactly, but roughly. But so then, let's say I'm teaching Geology 101 in a large university with 12 other faculty who also have sections. And we say, these are the learning outcomes. We all have the same objectives for the class. Then we get together at the end of the term or very near the start of the next term and say, what problems did you encounter with your students meeting those outcomes? And everybody will share. Part of this would be a reporting process, but when we sit down and talk about that, then we can address how to adjust the teaching strategies so that the learning happens. And that is such a rich conversation. So I might say to my math colleagues, hey, we're having trouble with dimensional analysis. Do you guys have any pointers on how we might get this across to students? Tried that, didn't work. Let's try this one. See what I mean? So we can work with each other as faculty to to improve the learning experience. So it's kind of cool stuff, and I just wanted to give a little impromptu plug, shameless plug for this workshop that will be put on by the ITALIC group. And you remember what ITALIC stands for, Judith? Institutional teaching.
Institutional teaching
And learning.
Thank you.
I'm reading it. Atta girl, way to go.
So Sarah Martin and company will be putting on that workshop. I would encourage attendance, yes.
Okay, I'd like to say, it's the workshops that we like to attend, like say that one, I have it on my list. A little bit is going on with our departments, so that we're too busy in our departments, so we don't get to attend some of this. So there's a little bit of gray area as to how that's gonna be handled the first out of the gate.
And this first time, this first development day, we're kind of feeling it out, and so it will be.
Some of us have even been asked to present like on the day, to get organized and putting together some stuff to do for the department, which is
For your
extremely
department.
time consuming. To kind of get things out the gate, so anyways, just that's a little bit kind of a heads up a little bit.
Yeah,
So-
and we realize that, and
Good,
that's
okay.
come to my attention, so we want this to be useful for all of you, and however this works out. So the adding of these 2 days to the academic calendar this year has been a little muddy at best about what they're for. So we will work that out. But my idea is always to how do we improve what we do as teachers? How do we become better, thus helping our students be successful? Yes.
Will the ones put on by our college, by our colleagues, be recorded? That might be a way to handle some of the conflict in
Yeah.
time.
We hadn't intended on that, but that's a possibility to look into.
Okay.
So those of you who deal with controversial subjects in your class, there's another one by a brave group of faculty to talk about how to moderate sideways conversations, being in the charged political and times we live in right now, so.
Yeah, that lineup is, I like to attend all of those, if they were offered at another time even, so yeah.
Well, since you guys are all new faculty, my goal is to do more of this kind of thing, so it's how we become better teachers. That's it. You can do the assessment eye roll when I leave. Assessment is cool. Helps our students. So I hope all of your terms are going well so far. It's been a long day for me. But
Well, thank you.
all right.
Any questions before he escapes? Yeah. As far as.
¿Preguntas, estudiantes?
Alright, well, thank you for hanging out.
Yeah.
A little extra long than you had planned.